You have biologically turned yourself into the opposite gender for one day. What do you? Pro tips from someone who struggled a lot with this while hiking and traveling. Squatting down with dresses or skirts makes peeing in bushes way easier. Girls' anatomy makes peeing with pants very difficult. You get good at this if you travel to places where bathrooms are literal holes in the ground. If you are out hiking or something and wearing pants, see if you can find a log or stone where she can sit and use the back of the log like a splash guard. Basically, sit back past the back edge of the log. If that's not possible, when she's gotta go, she's gotta go. Make sure she's leaning forward as she squats. Figuring that out helped me a lot. If you think that was awkward, imagine getting caught squatting with your pants way down, if not off, while peeing in a bush as a woman. Lol. You probably won't need to feel like you are going to jail, but the position you'd be in would be way more embarrassing. Having said all that, I'm a man, so I'm only assuming. It'll be really bad. Your gametes are haploid cells which contain half of your genetic information. With some scrambling between chromosomes, your offspring with yourself would have way less genetic diversity by way of receiving duplicate alleles. This is why inbreeding can be pretty bad for a population. Recessive alleles, which cause genetic disease, can become a lot more common as the genetic diversity drops. It would have the same effect that fucking your siblings over multiple generations would have, but in one generation. This is right, it wouldn't be a clone. Basically, if you had any recessive genes for any random mutations causing nasty stuff, each of them would have a 1 in 4 chance of coming out expressed. Lots of nasty genetic stuff is floating around in the human genome because it's recessive and very rare in the population, so it doesn't show up often enough to get weeded out. This would be like many generations of inbreeding in one birth. As a man, getting kicked in the nuts hurts immensely. However, it's not the worst pain I've ever felt, and I can't imagine it anywhere close to childbirth. Imagine pushing out kidney stones and then double the size and make it take half a day and then consider it. That seems worse than a kick to the nuts. I'm tall, so it wouldn't really impress her, hahaha, but having a penis could do the helicopter move in front of her and laughing about it with her, and told her if it's more painful having testicles than what we endure as women. Birth, periods, cramps, boobs, well you know, and if the emotions are the same, if estrogen is one hell of a kind or not compared to testosterone. Depends how this is gonna work. If I just turned into me, but a girl, I'd probably just jerk off and maybe take a nude or two. If I turn into a girl that would be most attractive to me, I'd definitely take nudes that would be most attractive to me. Age would also be an issue. Like, if I stay the same age, I'd probably have to avoid taking nudes since I'm still legally a minor. But if not, then fuck it. Literally, the circumstances matter too. Do I get like some sort of sandbox world for the day, or is it a regular day? In conclusion, in ideal conditions, I guess I'd try and get the most pleasure out of it as I can. Turn myself straight back to being a dude. Girls' bodies are fucking terrifying. Knowing my luck, I'd be deep into menstruation that day and not know why I'm angry, horny, sad, happy, have cravings, and both love and hate everything dear to me. Yay, finding my spot would be cool, but the trade-off is not even close to being worth it. Clearly I have to immediately harvest as much of my own genetic material as possible for after the switch back. Can I clone my opposite-gendered self? Could we reproduce? Could I harvest organs from said opposite-gendered clone? Would my body of one sex recognize it as still me? Or would I get donor rejection? Could I use these opposite-sexed cells to grow enough parts to surgically put myself halfway? Could I ship of Theseus my own body until I'm neither female nor male, but instead some halfway point of indeterminate status? Sure, that one day is cool, but all the stuff that could come after would be the true points of interest.
This and just pressure to do drugs in general. I was under the impression that some villains were going to actively try to force me to do drugs, and I know that is a legit concern when it comes to people slipping something in a drink. But this was in elementary school. Most of my life, people who offered me drugs were trying to be nice, and if I said no, they were happy to keep more drugs for themselves. This is the real answer, maybe not the most practical one, but if you get a job waiting tables, bartending on the weekends for even a few weeks, you'll meet multiple people with drug hookups. I kinda miss working in restaurants. Definitely not enough to ever go back, but at every office job I've worked since, there's this compulsion to present the most squeaky clean version of yourself to coworkers. Whereas working in restaurants, you'd have a coworker come in and immediately tell you, yeah, I caught my girlfriend cheating on me with my brother yesterday. After work I'm gonna scoop up an 8-ball and head across the street to get shit-faced. Wanna come? Kinda miss that total honesty and the shared commiseration of, well, this gig fucking sucks, but at least you guys are cool. The reason was because they massively overstated the danger of drugs. The kids that tried pot once and realized it didn't immediately throw their life into an unrecoverable death spiral were like, well, what the fuck else did they lie about? Turns out when you fill your information with big, scary lies, people go in literally the opposite direction later as they realize you're untrustworthy. They probably come from anonymous surveys given out to 12-year-olds. Those surveys never factored in that teenagers lie all the time on them because they think it's funny. I know this because I was one of those 12-year-olds surveyed, and all my friends joked afterwards that we smoked crack. We didn't coordinate to do it. It just seemed like such a stupid question to ask. It is impossible to accurately survey kids. They will mark off answers to make it appear normal so as not to get it thrown out, but toss in 1 or 2 WTF answers. If anything, it was a middle school protest about being made to do it in the first place. Same is true for those reference tests to test how well kids are learning. The smart kids Christmas tree it and then go to sleep. There is no gain from trying and no harm from failing, so then why try? How hard high school is. Teachers always said you would have to smarten up in high school and you would barely have time for anything. I crocheted my teacher a sweater for his dog in class once. I think he'll be okay. I barely did any homework in high school, still graduated with a high 70% average, which is still pretty decent in Canada. So when they told me the same stuff about college, I didn't listen. Pro tip: at least for a STEM major, they mean it for college. Did the same mistake, lol. School didn't prepare me for the actual challenge uni is. Depends on the school. More rigorous schools expect students to take multiple app courses. I had college friends who said college was a breeze compared to their private high school. Same for child abductions. The vast majority of missing children are custodial interference or runaways. Only about 100 stereotypical stranger danger kidnappings happen every year in the US. It's also been shown that children being overly worried about stranger danger will prevent them in many cases from seeking out help when they are lost or in trouble. Better to teach kids good common sense than catchphrases. Instead of teaching kids to be scared of all strangers, it can be good to teach them that when they're lost or in trouble to first look for those in authority, and if none are in the immediate area, look for parents with children. Oh, you reminded me. People in my country use police as a boogeyman. So, if a kid is misbehaving, the police is gonna take you away. Result: when my brother got lost in a mall, he kept hiding from every security guard and it took us ages to find him, because he had gotten lost by misbehaving. Thankfully, there were guards at the doors too and he didn't wander into the street, but damn. One time this much older and sketchy guy came up to me while I was pumping gas. He starts making conversation about random things and was really insistent on interacting in spite of my non-committal and yeah responses. When my tank was full, he tried to get me to hand him the nozzle before I clicked it off at the pump. He reached for it with the "let me have that, hon. I've got to pump my gas too." I held onto it and hung it back up on the pump, making sure I heard the click and the sale was closed out. He stalked off in kind of a huff while I got my receipt and got out of there. To this day I'm like, WTF the balls on that guy. Stranger rape. It still happens and is devastating, but most rapes are committed by someone known to the victim, not by a masked stranger popping out of the bushes. I think that emphasis on stranger fear discourages people from seeing red flags in situations with people they know. Wasn't it then found out that stranger danger did a lot of harm because when people were in actual danger they were less likely to seek out help from stranger because they were afraid of them. Also because it focused so much on strangers that it kinda further reinforced that non-strangers are safe. Now your creepy uncle who you would be wary of is just a creepy uncle, not a stranger, so he must be safe. My philosophy is generally that the average person you approach on the street will be reasonable, honest, and good-intentioned. The average person who approaches you on the street is much more likely to be trying to hurt or scam you. Edit. Yes, that makes you the creep, I guess. Exercise caution in general, but especially if they approached you. Drug dealers. I thought people would force that drugs down my throat until I was a broke addict. I have been offered it a few times in high school, but funny enough they were all very wholesome interactions. My favorite was a guy who I had never spoken to, who had just learned I was chronically ill, and he said that if I ever wanted to try anything he would give it to me for free and would help me to do it safely since he knew I didn't do drugs. It was just a very pure moment and I will never forget that look of kindness and concern in his eyes. I've since been around many drug dealers. I think everyone in the Netherlands has, and have never been forced, tempted or manipulated to do drugs. If you are not a model student and don't have excellent grades, you will never amount to anything in life. I was a model student and had excellent grades. I haven't amounted to much due to crippling anxiety and depression. Yay, I once saw it said that gifted students either became doctors, lawyers, or adults with crippling anxiety. Teaching kids to base their self-worth on academic achievement is essentially a high-risk, high-reward maneuver. You might give them the mentality to reach the top of the non-business income earners, but more likely you will scar them for life when they don't get there and have to live with not being okay with being mediocre. I once saw it said that gifted students either became doctors, lawyers, or adults with crippling anxiety, or doctors, lawyers with crippling anxiety. Playing with yourself will make you go blind. Sure, my eyesight has declined over the decades, but it's absolutely been worth it. My mom said some of her friends growing up were told lies like that. One friend was apparently told if she touched herself she would go crazy. My mom told me that this girl did go crazy because she was obsessed with trying to not touch herself, like after she peed she had to make sure her hands didn't touch anywhere. And this actually drove her crazy. Of course, I don't know if this is true or just a wild exaggeration from my mom, but she did seem sad when she told me that, so I think it might have been mostly true. The majority of those claims can be traced back to the same kind of quack medicine Kellogg was into. You know, the man who invented cornflakes to make people stop jacking off? The guy who popularized male circumcision because he thought it made boys not get off. The guy who advocated staunchly for using acid on little girls' clits specifically so they couldn't enjoy sex later in life. Sorry, I just listened to the Behind the Bastards episodes about him. It really did a great job explaining how Christian Puritanism and 1800s medicine both somehow revolved around jerk and the gherkin. Oh, and Kellogg was also a strong supporter of eugenics. That's not related to masturbation, but I wanted to mention it anyway. Fuck Kellogg. Most useful thing I learned from the fire safety stuff was how to check if something was hot without touching it. Hold the back of your hand near it and you can feel the radiant heat much better than any other way. Handy for me who has to occasionally handle pieces of metal of varying degrees of hotness. We learned stop, drop and roll. I didn't pay much attention. Years later, in my 20s, I caught on fire, panicked and started running around, increasing the flames. Thankfully a friend of mine chased me down, tackled me and rolled me around until the fire went out. If I caught on fire today I'd probably still do the wrong thing. Lol. Yo, that was one hell of a friend to literally bodily tackle a man on fire to save him. What a homie. How many times do you get a legit good reason to tackle that one dumb shit friend? My 4-year-old niece lectured me the other day about not having a fire ladder in my second story and fire extinguishers strategically placed through my house. I mean, she's not wrong, but it still stung. Edit. Yes, I will be getting some more fire equipment next month. I'll be sure to show her so she knows her tiny voice got heard. I mean, I have a fire ladder in my house and I'm 90% sure I would just be jumping out the window if there were an actual fire. Learning how to land would be a better investment. Getting written up at work. Turns out that permanent work record does not exist, and will not follow you from job to job for the rest of your life, or your school permanent record like all the tropes in shows and movies. No one cares that you pushed little Billy down in 4th grade. I remember my teachers always scaring me saying if I misbehave it'll go on my permanent record, as if some potential employer is going to be like, you're highly qualified for this job but unfortunately we can't hire you since you pushed Billy back in 4th grade. You're telling me that I could have assaulted Billy all I wanted in 4th grade? Talk about wasted opportunities. My parents both smoked before having kids, and my mom raised me on stories about how the first time she smoked a cigarette, she coughed so badly that she threw up. It made staying away from smoking cigarettes pretty easy, because I didn't want to puke. Once I was in college I brought up the story to her and she blinked like an owl caught in the sunlight. Wait, you believed me? She said. I was just trying to get you to not smoke. If smoking made me vomit, why do you think I smoked for 15 years? Good job, Mom. I could definitely see throwing up the first time you smoke a cigarette, especially if it's a really strong one. Cigarettes taste horrible and the nicotine makes you feel lightheaded and nauseous if it's your first time. I didn't throw up but I coughed my guts out. Same thing with the first time I tried weed. Coughed for what felt like eternity. Talking to people online, and then meeting them. I would never have met my partner, got my job, had my hobby, had any of my friends, traveled anywhere I got an Uber to if I hadn't. I am 100% serious. Every single aspect of my adult life is because of joining a single local Yahoo group and going to a gathering. Everything from where I've lived, to who I've been friends with, to the man I married, to the children I have raised has all stemmed from 2 people I met in that group. I just teared up looking at my best friend thinking how I wouldn't know her except for me having met those 2 people. My mom was obsessed with the idea that all bad shit only happened after midnight, so that was my ironclad curfew. Guess what, Mom? A ton of bad shit has happened to me in broad daylight. If the movie Gremlins ever raised an existential question in my jellyfish brain, it has to be this one: when does after midnight stop? 11:37, 13:15? How do the Gremlins know what time zone they're in? How about daylight savings time? The clues in the name. They work on GMT, Gremlin Mean Time. Apart from infamous quicksand, I thought it would be a bigger problem being stuck in the Alps and having to drink alcohol from a St. Bernard's necklace. Also, cannibalism was a huge concern in late elementary to early middle school days. It was highly unlikely we'd ever crash in the Andes or that our wagon train would get stuck in the mountains in winter, but for some reason all the kids in my school were concerned about it. Should we eat someone? Could we actually do it if we had to? Who should we eat first? the fat kid will keep, but we don't want the muscular guy to lose too much weight. We were pretty fucked up, I'm now realizing. Drug dealers. I thought people would force that drugs down my throat until I was a broke addict. I have been offered it a few times in high school, but funny enough they were all very wholesome interactions. My favorite was a guy who I had never spoken to, who had just learned I was chronically ill, and he said that if I ever wanted to try anything he would give it to me for free and would help me to do it safely since he knew I didn't do drugs. It was just a very pure moment, and I will never forget that look of kindness and concern in his eyes. I've since been around many drug dealers. I think everyone in the Netherlands has, and have never been forced, tempted or manipulated to do drugs.
Try to understand what a period feels like. My girl gets period cramps every once in a while and says it hurts like hell. Tells me I'm lucky for being a guy and don't have to worry about delivering in birth and fertilization. All men get is boners. Nothing meant to be sexist. But women are a lot stronger than we may perceive from a biological standpoint.